Ah,
This is a new place.
fancy seeing you here.
How have we turned up here, Ibrahim? What's going on?
Let's take a seat. There seems to be chairs here. We're in Islam Channel's offices. We, you know, Kabzi nearly got arrested yesterday.
What?
I actually turned up outside Downing Street, and Kabzi was about 100 yards away, backed into a corner by two hench policemen, and being questioned aggressively. And
What did you do, Kabzi?
Apparently it's my bag, the rucksack, and I was looking suspicious. Someone
Brown guy with a
So
massive
did they actually tell you to walk away to that side?
reported me.
Did they walk? Did really?
Do I need to
Kabzi's asking for trouble.
am I obliged to give it to you? Like, no. News roundup, episode 7, 8, 9, one of those. Take one.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IFG News Roundup. It's an intimate one today, Ibrahim. It looks like it's just you and me and our cameraman Kabzi. So let's dive straight into the rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Yeah?
I've already given you COVID, so it's fine.
we are actually kind of, you know.
This
doing our
is
thing
a
here.
computer effect. We're actually sat several yards apart.
Kabzi working his magic as always. Right, Ibrahim, here we go. So, driving into work or cycling?
Cycling.
Ilford or Stratford?
Stratford, I'd say, just
Ooh, chicken or meat?
meat.
Summer versus winter?
Summer.
Fish and chips or the English breakfast?
Fish and chips.
Fair. Right, let's crack on to the news, the next news story. So, Ibrahim, what fascinating stuff has been rippling through Britain today?
So there's been a lot of disturbances in our supply chain.
Okay.
And I think it's continuing with the theme that we were talking about a few weeks ago about how, you've got COVID, which has caused massive disruption in a lot of different spaces actually. One is just the logistics part of it. So a whole lot of supply containers have been delayed. And then you've got the energy prices have gone up massively as well as a result of gas shortages, or Russia might be diverting gas, or who knows what's going on there. And that has meant that the cost of actually producing stuff has gone up quite considerably, and then that reflects in the the pricing itself.
Yep.
And the cost of that means that petrol prices can potentially go up as well, which means that the overlying logistics and the transport aspect, that price goes up as well. So that whole thing has meant both delays and shortages, but also price hikes as well, because demand and supply, right? And then you've had a bunch of companies come out and say that we think, IKEA for example, think that this is going to continue for at least another year. Is their impression. I don't know, how have you been affected by all of this?
My energy bill has gone up considerably. It's more than doubled. Obviously, we know that recently with the national insurance increase and other tax increases and other things that have happened, that generally the price in a lot of stuff has gone up. Yeah. And that has kind of like affected how everyone has done their household budgeting, especially me. I've had to, kind of reallocate certain budgets in the household because of this. And, we know that there's already a supply chain issue with, like, for example, chicken. And there's fears that there's going to be supply chain issues with other supermarket goods, such as turkey for Christmas. I mean, although as Muslims, this doesn't really affect us, but when one thing is affected in the supermarket, it will have a natural kind of like impact on everything else around it. So I think we're now starting to really feel the difficulties that came with COVID. So in the beginning, it wasn't as clear that COVID was having such of an impact on everyone. It was mostly on the industries. But now we're seeing the impact that COVID and a few other events had on the industries now fall back to us. So I think in the next few months, we're going to see more people cross the poverty line in the negative sense. And we're going to see more people go through a harsher winter, which necessarily means that, things are going to be a bit more harder for people, especially the vulnerable. You're going to see the older people suffer more. Maybe, a considerable number of elderly always pass away every winter, especially those that don't have the money to afford, heating their house. So how much more so is that the case now? I really do hope the government do take action in some sense. I'm not sure what they can entirely do, but in whatever way they can protect the average Joe would be something that I think everyone would be looking towards.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think the other big thing is that Brexit and the UK has been particularly badly hit because of that we've had a whole lot of labour shortages as well.
Oh yeah.
And that's, I think, exacerbated the whole situation. Like with lorry drivers, for example, that just makes it worse on the supply chain. And then I think with Brexit again, you've had a whole bunch of tariffs and additional barriers put in place, which is going to have an impact. I think in terms of ways to deal with it, you had some sensible thoughts. Other thoughts to add to that would be that think about how you can inflation-proof your finances, because for those of you who may not know what inflation is, it's the idea of prices increasing slowly over time, and that's happening right now. And we've got inflation kicking in. So there's a few ways to deal with that. The first is to make sure that you don't hold that much in cash. So your cash, you deploy it into things that are going to rise with inflation. So things like gold could be useful, property could be useful. They're good, solid, fail-safe options. We're actually going to be covering quite extensively in the next few months a company called Minted, which is a way to actually buy gold really cheaply relative to anyone else on the market, which I'm quite excited about digging into, inshallah, over the next few weeks and months. And we'll actually cover, those guys. We'll have a proper interview with them and everything. So quite excited about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, on to our next story for the day. Mark Zuckerberg has been making some considerable moves. He's aiming to create what he calls the Metaverse. Now, for any of you that have watched the movie Ready Player One, you'll kind of know what I mean, in the sense that the Metaverse is this, it's basically the internet in VR, where you basically, whatever you create, it's virtual reality and you can literally just dive into it. And he wants to create this thing, which will actually, if he does manage to create it, will be revolutionary. And, he aims to get 10,000 workers in the EU just to create, work on this one massive project. So I think it's really exciting stuff, but at the same time, I do fear that it's not while the technology has a lot of application, I do also feel that the entertainment aspect for it. So for example, just to give some context, the movie Ready Player One sees people immersed in these VR worlds. It's a future reality, but you see that most people are spending almost the entirety of their lives outside of work, just in this VR world where they can literally do whatever they want. There's different websites, you could call them, or planets, or for different things. So if you want to go and experience a haunted house or go inside a movie or whatever, you're literally there. And it's just endless and boundless entertainment. And I just see I see that much level of entertainment as being soul destroying, while the application of the technology is very good.
Yeah.
But it's natural that people will use it more for their entertainment purposes than for actually practical purposes.
And what on Ready Player One, what happens? So when they go to work, what are they doing at work?
Well, they're all thinking about the game. That's
Right.
like, because it's like one big. Have you The Sims, right?
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
like this artificial world that you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
create.
yeah.
So basically, people go into this world and they basically just want to chill out in it. You can go race cars in it, and you can own what you don't have in real life. But the thing is, people in real life would be living in like squalor conditions.
Yeah.
But because to kind of distract themselves from the situation of their real world experience, they're going inside this engine where they're creating mansions for themselves, and they're dating people in the virtual world and stuff, rather than focusing on their real lives. And I just feel like from an Islamic standpoint as well, that's completely antithetical to what Islam actually tells us to do, which is to actually go out, seek provision in the world, make a change, make a difference. And the Qur'an kind of Allah tells us in the Qur'an that this world wasn't created for play and leisure.
Yeah.
But that's what I feel like this technology will mostly be used for.
Yeah, really interesting thoughts. I think it's partly, I guess, to do with how we think about acting, how we think about gaming generally. That, there's this concept of, now this is me going to go very deep, but there's a concept of mimesis in
Okay.
Plato's Republic and in Greek literature, and the thinking there is like, how is it moral to be an actor? Is it moral to do certain kind of artwork? And the reason why this discussion comes up in the first place is because the action of you being an actor, of you doing certain things, actually means that you are physically doing those things, or you are physically thinking those things. So sure, it's if you act out, I don't know, swearing or killing someone or doing X thing in a game, or in a metaverse, or whatever context similar to that, yes, it's not technically happening, but what it has done is it's unlocked certain things in your brain, and so the whole discussion is, well, is that moral or not, and is that a good thing to do or not? And I think regardless of the morality, just in the abstract, like, is this thing that you're doing, is killing someone on Grand Theft Auto moral or not? I think that's a separate question. The wider question is, what impact does this have on, as you were saying, our culture and our overall character? So if you take a character-based approach to morality, then I think this becomes very, very problematic. And I suspect what we're going to see in the next 5, 10, 15 years is this ongoing debate between character, what is at heart a character-based morality, versus a consequentialist morality, where they say, well, it's not harming anyone. And I think we're going to see that tussle play out.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. It's like it's that ongoing debate, right? Like, do violent video games make children inherently more violent?
Yeah.
But then the counter argument to that is usually people say, like, look, if you're killing people in Call of Duty, you're not doing it in real life. And most children generally understand the difference between fiction and real life and do it more as a kind of like sort of entertainment, and you're not seeing that being reflected in real life. And I think maybe the statistics are too early to kind of determine that. But it will be an interesting debate that will play out, and I think it will always be something that will continuously be discussed and reassessed.
Agreed. And I'm the other thing I'm worried about here is the Mark Zuckerberg, because he doesn't have a good track record with anything, quite frankly. I think he's a bad force for the world at this point.
It's actually quite funny you say that, because in Ready Player One, the villain is this huge corporate magnate that basically want to control the game and monetize everything inside it, sell players' data and info to large corporations and make huge amounts of profits. Because naturally, if you're inside this world, you can literally in this world order whatever foods you want, do whatever you want, your address is linked to it, your likes and preferences. And you're wearing like haptic feedback bodysuits that are measuring your temperature, measuring your weight, your everything. So all those statistics, that data, imagine if you sold that to companies that could profit off it. There's huge amounts of money to be made here. And Mark Zuckerberg, like, we already know his track record right now. And we also know the issues that Facebook kind of has in the reputation part currently. So
Agree.
Doesn't look positive.
Definitely.
Right, let's move on to our next story. And this one's an interesting one, even though it seems like a minor thing, but it's tied to a bigger issue, I promise. So we'll get into that. So a lot of developments have been happening in China, especially with regards to censorship. And the Muslims currently will particularly know that Apple has taken down, at the request of the Chinese government, a very popular Qur'an app. Now, for us, this might seem like, oh, this is typical China, but also LinkedIn, which was one of the only major social media sites that was operating within China, has decided to pull out of China altogether. And the reason they've done that is because complying to the government's requests of who to censor and who not to censor has been proven to be very difficult for the organization and too much hassle and not worth the money. So they've entirely pulled out. So this Qur'an app used to have like 1 million users in China alone.
What was it called?
Qur'an Majid.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not familiar with that app, and I think most people in the West probably have different ones, but this one seems to be the popular version in China. And I think, there's the added link, for example, recently several Marvel superhero movies, including Shang-Chi, which featured the first Chinese lead actor, that wasn't played in China either, which was a huge kind of hit to Marvel's profits because they have a huge market in China. And again, it was because of the censorship, and the movie apparently had an actor who criticized the Chinese government or something like that. So,
Right.
so I think there is a big discussion to have around censorship and the Chinese state. What are your initial impressions, Ibrahim?
I think obviously the Chinese, I mean, all of these large governments and large countries, superpowers, it's not as straightforward as to say they're pure evil, because and the same goes with the USA, where you've got, and they're not individuals, right? So you can call an individual evil, but these are loosely connected organizations and groups of individuals with their own competing views and things going on. So China has done, I think, really positive work potentially in investing in emerging countries such as African countries and Pakistan to some extent. Their role there could be seen as possibly beneficial to Muslims because it's a counterpoint to the the India, USA, Israel kind of axis on the other side. But then on the other hand, what they've done to the Uyghurs is just horrific. But the point I'm making is that these are almost like amoral entities. It's very hard to attach morality to them, and the people at the head of these things, the people who make the decisions, is very, very important to call them out on it. And on the censorship point, I think it's a fascinating situation. I think China, what it's doing against the Uyghurs, obviously, and what it's doing against Muslims generally, we don't like that. But we can also, to some extent, learn from it as well, because they've been quite militant about it. And they actually set up the infrastructure from the start, where it's called the Great Firewall, the Chinese firewall. They actually control, the key pipelines of data coming into China. The government does that. And so it actually can implement proper firewalls, much more so than other countries. And what they've done is they've said, kids, we don't want to let you play computer games for too long. It's actually illegal now for kids to play more than X computer games. They don't want any other culture other than Chinese culture. So they're getting rid of Islam, which they see as the one big final threat to their, I think, Chinese culture. So it's obviously bad because they're going after Islam, but there's also, in a weird way, a lesson for us in terms of how we approach, bringing up our kids, for example.
Yeah, fair. I think that one thing in particular is noteworthy about this whole censorship discussion is that I don't think it's exclusive to China either.
Sure.
I think that because we live in the West and we consume Western media, a lot of us will think that all of this, that China's the only one that does censorship. When, for example, when there was a huge kind of Palestinian protests that were going on, for example, a few months back in Ramadan, as to the Israeli attacks on Gaza, I think, we know at the time Facebook and Instagram by extension and other social media platforms were heavily censoring anything to do with Palestinian activism or pro-Palestinian views, whether they be by celebrities or by a normal person. So I think this kind of, but when China does it, there's a big shout and a big kind of hoo-ha about, China's doing censorship. Yeah. And I do think that while I do believe that to an extent certain freedoms should be allowed, but at the same time, if I was to look at it from the Chinese perspective and not, have this dichotomy of good and evil, and just look at them as being secular, communist atheists who want to preserve their culture, you can understand where they're coming from a much better perspective than the way the values or ways that the West kind of propagates on this. And I think this kind of leads to my next point, which I think is really important, that Muslims, for example, build our own platforms that aren't necessarily Muslim exclusive, but where we have Muslims at the head of organizations, so that, for example, when we are protesting about Palestine or whatever, these things aren't censored as heavily, because we then create our own platforms in the sense where our views are protected in that sense.
Yeah. It's a very, I think it's a really fair point. I think there's a lot under the surface here though, because the success of places, companies like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and all of these other social media platforms, is that it's not just the pure technology. It's not just the fact that they are a great tech company. It's also the fact that they are superpowers. They're created within a superpower, of which they're created within a superpower that has a large population as well. So China has well over, I don't know how many billion people, and America has about 300 million people. It allows them to get to a certain level of scale, so that you get the network effects that get started. Smaller countries struggle to do that.
Yeah.
And then also I think there's the quote unquote sex appeal of having a US Silicon Valley company, and that makes it cool. And because coolness, and there is a very important link between why Silicon Valley is right next to Hollywood, and there's a lot of synergy between the two of them, because they lend coolness to each other, and I think that's an important part of all of this as well. So things like Clubhouse, for example, initially took off because of celebrities. Anyway, I think it's a commendable thing that we should try and get Muslims in there. But I think we also need to work a lot more on this infrastructure. It's a long journey in order for us to get there.
True, definitely. And it won't come easy. Right, that leads us to the next round of rapid fire questions. You ready for this, Ibrahim?
Let's do it.
All right. Erdogan or Imran Khan?
Imran Khan, obviously.
Oh, I would have went with Erdogan. Umayyads or Abbasids?
The Abbasids.
Okay. Abu Bakr or Umar, radiallahu anhuma?
Both.
Yeah, fair.
Out.
Equal love. that's all right. Urdu poetry or Arabic poetry?
Arabic, just.
Okay. Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Right.
Good answer there.
Fair. Okay. Now for our final news story for today, I literally have no clue what this means, Ibrahim. So you're gonna have to really dumb it down for me. But tell us what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So the first Bitcoin-based ETF, exchange traded fund, has launched. The key bit in the terms and conditions is that it's a futures-based Bitcoin ETF. So futures are these contracts, these derivatives that a lot of Muslim scholars say are not permissible actually, where you are saying that here's a piece of paper that says that I will buy £100 of Bitcoin from you in, let's say, 1 month's time, and that is worth X amount right now. So the buyer thinks that the Bitcoin price is probably going to go up, so I'm getting this cheaper, and the seller thinks the Bitcoin price is going to go down, so I'm getting a good deal here, and so then they can trade that future contract. So what this Bitcoin ETF is that they've taken all the futures around Bitcoin, and they're going to be buying and selling them to, in effect, synthetically create the effect of an ETF that tracks the Bitcoin price. And this is actually quite common, by the way, in ETFs. So, ETFs often will, rather than buying the underlying stock, they will actually buy derivatives, which are a lot cheaper because you're not actually having to hold the stock. It's just a contract to synthetically create the price of, the S&P 500, for example. So they've taken that concept and they've applied it here. And the reason why they've done this, and this is the important point, is that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, does not allow anyone at this stage to create actual cryptocurrency ETFs. So this is the closest thing that they can get to it, which they would allow, because it's a future-based thing. So they can't really stop that from happening. And I think that for Muslims, obviously, this is problematic because of the Sharia compliance issues that I mentioned. But it's a really important first step for cryptocurrency. And I think that this is going to open the road for actual ETFs that are backed by cryptocurrency coming into the market. And I think that is going to be a crucial part of cryptocurrency now becoming mainstream, because at the moment maybe 10-15% of the the wealthy middle class of the USA or the world owns some cryptocurrency, and mainly men. But when you open it up in this way, where it's exchange traded, it's a lot more diversified. You can invest in it and forget about it, and it makes it a lot more accessible using the existing pipelines of brokers and the account that you might have with them. That means that women and other and wider population that isn't particularly interested in cryptocurrency suddenly become a lot more likely to invest in it. So positive news, I think, overall, and lots more action, I think, that's going to be happening there.
And has this news, like, so I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who doesn't know, because I actually have no idea about what any of this really means or looks like, but how does this affect, we know Bitcoin's price has really just jumped up massively. Is that just to is that because I'm assuming people are more optimistic about Bitcoin not being this bubble anymore that's eventually going to pop and just disappear?
Exactly, I think so.
So, okay, so that's very interesting and exciting news. And these normal, so not the futures-based ETFs, but the normal ETFs, are they permissible?
The ETFs, stocks and shares ETFs are generally permissible as long as two things happen. One is that it's not a derivative-based ETF, so it actually holds shares in the underlying, and also if the shares themselves are permissible. So if it's alcohol stock ETF, that would not be permissible.
Okay, interesting. So it would essentially mean Bitcoin would basically be on the stock market.
In a sense, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So you wouldn't need Binance anymore or like Coinbase to trade Bitcoin. You could just do it on this.
No, you would, because Binance and Coinbase are like the AJ Bell, where they are the brokers. So if you want to buy individual stocks, or even if you want to buy more complicated funds, you would use them.
Okay.
Whereas you could use the actual stock, the actual AJ Bell to buy, let's say this kind of ETF.
Okay, very interesting stuff. And with that, let's move on to our final round of rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
So, cats or dogs?
Cats.
Texting or phone calls?
Texting.
Office or working from home?
Office.
Okay. Favorite investment, right? Property or gold?
Property.
Same. Stocks or crypto?
Crypto.
Ooh.
Same. It has to be crypto for me.
Today,
Fair. And that is it for today. So Jazakallah
Fantastic.
khairan for everyone joining us today. Jazakallah khair for Ibrahim for these fascinating insights. And Jazakallah khairan to Kabzi for, setting this all up in this wondrous new location. And Jazakallah khairan to Islam Channel for letting us do it. So that's a wrap today, guys. And see you for the next episode in a fortnight.
Well, so one last thing. We're in Islam Channel because we're kicking off the Halal Money Show, 8 p.m. on Wednesdays. It's kicking off on the 20th, which is today, but this will be going out later. But it's on for 7 weeks, so make sure you tune in.
Definitely. Take care, guys, and see you in a fortnight.
Assalamu alaikum.